Hello friend, welcome to all of you. This last lecture of topic number 3, employment and output theory. In the previous lecture we discussed about the Keynes theory of employment assumption, and here we discuss the explanation about his theory. So the Keynesian theory of employment still to the very popular before of Great Depression 1929 to 30, but after that the classical theory was failed to analysis of employment and phases of trade cycle like recession and deflation. The classical theory of employment was criticized by John Keynes in his book The General Theory of Employment, Interest and Money in 1936. He not only criticized the classical theory and sales law of market, also proponed his own theory and separately explained his theory, which is widely accepted over the world. So we are looking here the Keynesian theory of the employment. So Keynes is assumed that there is the closed economy, and Keynes is assumed that the perfect competition, the macro level approach for his the analysis, and short term phenomena he is considered for his analysis. So Keynesian thought is brought revolutionary and fundamental changes in the economy. So it has been called new economics or economic revolution. Whenever the failure of classical theory of full employment, so Keynes tried to find some answer in his theory. So how will be equilibrium is achieved in the economy, and whether it is the full employment or the underemployment level, how we will remove the problem of unemployment and then depression and recession. So this question he tried to find out in his theory. He also explained some innovative concept in his theory, like the concept of the marginal propensity of consume. Then he explained the innovative concept of the liquidity preference and the effective demand. So some innovative concept he also explained in his theory and tried to explain the how to achieve the employment level in economy and equilibrium level in economy, underemployment level or the full employment level. So Keynesian theory of income and employment. According to employment level determination to Keynesian point of view, Keynesian theory of income and employment is short-term theory because he assumed that the amount of capital, the size of population and labor force technology and the efficiency of the labor etc. remain constant. That's why according to Keynesian theory, value of employment depend on level of national income and output. According to his theory, the short-term increase the national income would be increased in the employment. So large of the volume of employment means the large of national income, less of the employment means the less national income. So Keynes theory is also known as the Keynesian theory of income determination. Effective demand and employment. So according to Keynes, the level of employment in the short run depend on the aggregate effective demand for goods in the country, and the greater effective demand means the greater volume of employment and vice versa. Total employment depend upon the total demand, and unemployment is the result of deficiency of total demand. So there is need to increase the effective demand according to Keynesian point of view. The effective demand is represent the total money spent on the consumption and the investment. The total expenditure is equal to the total national income, which is equal to the national output. Thus the effective demand is equal to national income and equal to national output. And determination of effective demand, for explain the whole economy as the amount of employment is determined by the aggregate supply and the aggregate demand, and he has explained that the two forces is they decide the effective demand, the aggregate demand price and the aggregate supply price. So which is determine the level of the employment economy at a particular track. So let's discuss now to the forces of aggregate supply function and aggregate demand function, which is determine the effective demand. Effective demand is the point where the aggregate demand and aggregate supply are intersect to each other and equal to each other. So first we looking the aggregate demand price. As per the Keynesian theory, the aggregate demand function has play is a more important role determining the employment, because in the short run the aggregate supply the factors are the constant. So aggregate demand function show for much possible level of employment to total sum of money. The demand for firm or industry means the a schedule or various amount of commodity which will be purchased at a service of the price. In aggregate demand price means, in short, the amount of expenditure expected by when given number of workers are employed to produce goods and services, it's called the aggregate demand. So aggregate demand means the amount of expenditure expected by when the given number of workers are employed to produce goods and services, it's called the aggregate demand in Keynesian theory. So aggregate demand schedule, Keynes also given the aggregate demand schedule. The aggregate demand schedule show the varying amount of money that the expenditure expected receive at a different level of production and employment. So expected receipts at the different level of employment and production we see in this schedule. So employment level in given in lakh rupees and the aggregate demand in given in crores. So 10 lakh is the employment level where the 100 is the aggregate demand, and when it is increased and become the 30 lakh of employment level, that time the 300 is the aggregate demand. So we see here the aggregate demand schedule, which is the represent the expected receive at a different level of the production and the employment. The next thing is the aggregate demand price function. According to Keynes, the aggregate demand function shows the relation between the amount spent on consumption and investment expenditure and the aggregate demand. So aggregate demand function is equal to C plus I plus G. The purchase of goods spent on the particular the goods, the consumption goods and investment goods. So it's called the C, and this one explained by the Keynes his theory, the short run earlier, the aggregate demand function. So aggregate demand is a function is equal to C plus I, means the consumption goods demand and the investment goods demand, C plus I. So later on he added the third number component, the G means the government. So aggregate demand function is equal to C plus I plus G. So here the C means the consumption expenditure, I means the investment expenditure, G means government expenditure on the consumption and the investment. So aggregate demand price function is also given by the Keynes. So aggregate demand curve, he also given the aggregate demand curve. The aggregate demand curve is show the different level of employment and the different level of aggregate demand. The slope of aggregate demand curve is upward to the right, show the demand in increase with increase in employment. So it is quite different from the normal demand curve and opposite to the normal demand curve, and it is the show the downward to the right. So it is the upward and the show the downward to the right. So it is the upward shape of the aggregate demand curve. The slope of aggregate demand curve is upward to the right, showing that the demand is increased with the increase in employment, and it is called the aggregate demand curve. The x-axis we measure the employment and output, and the y-axis we measure the expected receipts. Next is the aggregate supply. The aggregate supply price means the refer the total supply of goods and services in economy where the entrepreneurs employ some labor in the incur some cost of production. So aggregate supply price means at a given level of employment labor, aggregate supply price is the total amount of money which all the entrepreneurs in the economy take together must expected receive by given number of labor employed. So as the amount of employment on labor increase, the total cost of production will be also increase. We can construct the schedule or curve, aggregate supply schedule and aggregate supply curve with the help of these price at a different level of employment. So aggregate supply schedule, the aggregate supply price is the schedule of the minimum amount of proceed required to induce varying quantity of employment. So aggregate supply schedule showing the aggregate supply price, different level of employment. So we can illustrate here the imaginative aggregate supply schedule. The employment level in the lakhs, 10 lakhs to 30 lakhs, and aggregate supply cost and aggregate supply in the crore rupees. The 10 lakhs is the employment level. That time the 75 crore is the aggregate supply cost. And when the employment level reached to 30 lakhs, the aggregate supply cost is reached to the 400. The next is about the aggregate supply price function, and according to Keynes, the aggregate supply function show the relation between the number of workers, employment, and aggregate supply price. The Keynesian aggregate supply function is illustrated in the following way. So we can illustrate the aggregate supply price function. Aggregate supply price function, Y is equal to Kn. So here Y means the real income, F means the function, K for the capital, N means the labor. In the short term, stock of the capital is K is the fix. So K is the fix. So N means the labor, and the real income is depend upon the labor also. So aggregate supply price function. So Y is the function of N in short. So this means the level of income is depend upon the supply and use of the resources. We can illustrate the supply curve also with the help of this schedule. So aggregate supply curve. The aggregate supply curve shows the different level of employment at the different price aggregate supply. The slope of aggregate supply curve will be depend on physical and technological condition of the economy, and physical and technological condition remain constant in short run, and that's why the aggregate supply curve slope is upward to the right, and the aggregate supply curve AS will be rise vertically when the full employment level is achieved in the economy. The Keynesian analysis of the determination of employment in the capitalistic economy in the short run aggregate supply curve can be assumed to be constant. So Keynes is assumed that in the aggregate supply curve is in short run is the constant, and therefore he paid more attention the factor determine the demand. But here we looking the x-axis the employment, and the y-axis we looking the expected expenditure, and aggregate supply curve which is the shape of the upward to the right. It's called the AS, means the aggregate supply curve. It is the upward slope. So how the equilibrium of the economy and determine the employment level? The volume of employment in the community depend upon the state, that the effective demand, it is the deficiency of effective demand, and therefore the result of unemployment in the economy. So effective demand means a position where the aggregate demand and aggregate supply are equal to each other and determine the employment in the economy and reach the economy equilibrium position. The equilibrium level of employment is determined intersection between the aggregate demand curve and aggregate supply curve. But there is not necessary the equilibrium level of employment is always full employment, is also the less than full employment or the underemployment. So according to Keynes, the equilibrium position of the economy is the less than full employment or the underemployment situation also. So effective demand means the deficiency of the demand, and the deficiency because of the gap between the income and consumption. As the income increase, the consumption increase, but increase in the consumption is less than the income. So marginal propensity of consume is less than 1, means it leads that increase the unemployment in the economy. So Keynes is given his explanation with following table. We looking the aggregate demand and aggregate supply and the employment level also. Here the combination of the employment level, aggregate supply cost, aggregate demand, and aggregate demand which is the change after some time. So first column we looking here the employment. So here we looking the employment in lakhs rupees, and the 10 lakh rupees the employment, that time aggregate supply cost is the 75 and aggregate demand is the 100. And when the employment level become a 20 lakhs, that time 200 crore rupees aggregate supply and the aggregate demand is also 200. So here is the equilibrium level of the economy, but when the expectation is change of the market and the aggregate demand is changed again, so aggregate supply is also changed as per the demand, and the next the equilibrium point where the 30 lakh employment level is achieved in economy, 400 crore rupees is the aggregate supply cost, and that time also the change in demand, the 400 crore, and that time the again economy reached the equilibrium position. So where the aggregate demand is equal to aggregate supply is the equilibrium position. The first time it is the 200 when the 20 lakh is the employment provided, and again the change in demand, that time 30 lakh employment level is provided where the aggregate supply is 400 and aggregate demand is 400. The next is about the equilibrium of the economy and the determination of employment level throughout the figure. Looking here the one diagram which is the explained also the Keynesian theory. So OX axis show the employment and output, here the level of output and employment. X axis AD1 is the aggregate demand curve, so AD and AD1 is the aggregate demand curve, and AS is the aggregate supply curve. And the representing the aggregate supply means receipts, which is the entrepreneurs together expected to receive the various supply. Y-axis receipts of money, x-axis level of employment. So first the point of L where the ON is the output level, where the aggregate supply is ON, and that time aggregate demand is M. So again the expectation is increase the aggregate demand and reach to the E point where the output is also increased ON2. E is the point where the aggregate demand and aggregate supply are equal to each other. Again the expectation is more, so there is a more demand is increase in aggregate supply also. E1 is the next equilibrium point, and that time ON3 is the production and employment level, and economy reach into the E1 point, and OF is the full employment level. Before full employment level, E point or E1 point, there is the equilibrium of the economy according to Keynes. So the economy is the equilibrium in the before of the full employment or the underemployment according to Keynes. So determination of effective demand, the aggregate demand and aggregate supply are equal to each other, and the employment in the economy equilibrium. The effective demand is the aggregate demand price which become the effective when the aggregate supply price and the aggregate demand price as equal, thus represent the position of short run equilibrium. It is clear that the employment level of the economy is determined in short run by the effective demand, and effective demand is a short run equilibrium level where the particular aggregate demand which is equal to aggregate supply and determine the level of income and employment. So what is the effective demand is equal to national income equal to value of national output equal to national expenditure on consumption, and expenditure on consumption plus investment goods. So effective demand means aggregate demand is equal to C, and C plus R plus G. So aggregate demand is represent to A, D, C means the consumption demand. So here is the equal sign but need to the plus. So C plus R plus G. C means consumption demand, I means the investment demand, and G means government expenditure. So here is the end of the Keynesian theory. According to Keynes, the underemployment and less than full employment level is determined in the economy, and it is depend on the effective demand where the aggregate demand is equal to aggregate supply. So classical theory is still to the popular, still to the 1920 to 30 Great Depression, but after that the classical theory failed to analysis of the situation of the unemployment, why the unemployment is created. But Keynes is given the answer, the unemployment is created because of lack of effective demand, and he given his answer in his book The General Theory of Employment, Interest, Money in 1936. And according to Keynes, the problem of unemployment due to the deficiency of effective demand, and the effective demand where the short run equilibrium level where the particular aggregate demand which is equal to aggregate supply and determine the level of income and employment. The effective demand is equal to C plus I plus G. Aggregate demand means A, D, C means the consumption demand, I means investment demand, and G means government expenditure. The equilibrium level of employment does not need to be always full employment, and the economy be equilibrium at the less than full employment and under employment level. So Keynes find the some answers of his question, whether the economy is the equilibrium and the economy is the equilibrium under employment level, and the reason of unemployment is the effective demand. So references for this topic, you can use M.L. Jingan macroeconomic theory, H.L. Ahuja macroeconomic theory, Rasal R.G., S.P.Adhav, Hotekar, Gola business economics, Sem-III books is also used for this topic. So you can refer these books for this Keynesian theory of employment. Assignment question will be asked for you. Explain in detail Keynesian theory of employment. These question will be asked in examination for 20 marks, and it is a very important question will be asked in examination. So thank you for watching this video, and next time we will be looking the topic number 4 video. Thank you.